the frozen grip of a relentless winter, where the snow fell like silent accusations from a sky heavy with unspoken regrets. The rancher, known only as Elias, trudged through the drifts that blanketed the once vibrant plains of Montana, his boots crunching against the icy crust that hid the decay beneath, his breath forming fleeting clouds that danced mockingly before his weathered face, a face etched with lines of loss and survival. His black cowboy hat pulled low to shield eyes that had seen too much horror in this broken world, a world ravaged by the fungal plague that turned men into monsters, the infected wandering like shadows of forgotten humanity, their guttural moans echoing through the abandoned towns that dotted the landscape like graves, waiting to be filled. And Elias, a man who had once herded cattle under endless blue skies, now herded only his own solitude, his revolver holstered at his hip, a constant reminder of the choices he'd made to stay alive, choices that haunted him in the quiet hours when the wind howled like the ghosts of his past, his white horse Ghost trailing faithfully behind, its coat a stark contrast to the blood-stained snow, its reins loose in Elias's gloved hand as they approached the flickering lights of what seemed like a mirage, a small settlement huddled against the night, wooden buildings sagging under the weight of snow, their windows aglow with the warm promise of life inside. But Elias knew better than to trust such illusions, for in this apocalypse, light often drew the darkness closer, and as he drew nearer, the distant shambling figure of an infected caught his eye, its ragged clothes torn and frozen, breath steaming from a mouth twisted in perpetual agony, stumbling away from the porch of a modest cabin where a family gathered around a makeshift Christmas dinner, their laughter muffled through the frosted glass, Santa hats perched atop heads oblivious to the peril outside, children pressing noses to the pain, eyes wide with wonder at the falling snow, while adults carved what little meat they had scavenged, candles flickering like fragile hopes, and Elias's heart clenched at the sight, a pang of envy for their fragile normalcy, but he pushed it down, focusing instead on the small form huddled on the porch steps, a little girl no more than 7, her curly blonde hair matted with snow, barefoot in the biting cold, clutching a ragged doll to her chest as if it were her only anchor in this storm of chaos, her red dress threadbare and stained, her wide eyes reflecting the lantern's glow that Elias now held aloft, its flame dancing wildly as he knelt before her, the infected receding into the shadows, perhaps sated or distracted. And the girl looked up at him with a mixture of fear and desperate pleading, her voice a whisper carried on the wind.
"Can you pretend to be my dad?"
"Just until Mommy comes back?" she asked, her words piercing through the armor Elias had built around his soul. And in that moment, time seemed to freeze, the snowflakes suspended in the air like unanswered prayers, as Elias remembered his own daughter, lost to the outbreak years ago, her laughter echoing in his dreams, and he extended his hand, calloused and steady, touching hers gently, the warmth of human connection sparking in the cold void. But the story of how they got here began months earlier, in the sweltering heat of a dying summer, when Elias had been riding solo across the Badlands, scavenging for supplies in ruined outposts, his horse the only companion that hadn't betrayed him. And one fateful dusk, as the sun bled red across the horizon, he stumbled upon a quarantine zone overrun by clickers, those blind horrors that navigated by sound, their fungal growths pulsing like malignant hearts. And in the chaos of evasion, he heard a child's cry, faint but insistent, leading him to a collapsed barn where the girl, Lily, hid beneath hay bales, her mother nowhere in sight. Those signs of a struggle painted a grim picture, blood trails leading into the wilderness, and Elias, against his better judgment, pulled her from the debris, her doll clutched tightly, her eyes brimming with tears as she whispered of raiders who had taken her mom, promising to return but never doing so. And though Elias grumbled about the burden, he couldn't leave her to the mercy of the wilds, so he hoisted her onto Ghost, wrapping her in his spare blanket, and they rode into the night, the first threads of an unlikely bond weaving between them, as Lily chattered about fairy tales and stars, her innocence a balm to his scarred spirit. And over the weeks that followed, they traversed treacherous terrains, dodging patrols from the remnants of government forces, bartering with suspicious traders in hidden camps, where Elias taught her to shoot a slingshot, to spot infected from afar and to never trust strangers fully. Yet in quiet moments by campfires, Lily would ask about his family, drawing out stories he thought buried, of a wife who danced in the rain, a daughter who dreamed of horses, both taken by the plague in its early days, leaving Elias to wander as a ghost himself. and Lily, sensing his pain, would share her own tales of a mother who sang lullabies and promised a better tomorrow, a tomorrow that seemed further away with each passing day. But as winter descended like a predator, blanketing the world in white silence, their journey grew perilous, food scarce, the cold seeping into bones like doubt into minds. And one blizzard night, they sought shelter in an abandoned ranch, where Elias fortified the doors against howls that could be wind or worse, and Lily, feverish from exposure, clung to him, murmuring deliriously about her mom returning with gifts, and Elias, holding her close, felt the stirrings of paternal instinct he thought long dead, promising in whispers that he'd protect her, come what may. But fate twisted cruelly when scouts from a nearby survivor group spotted their fire, leading to a tense standoff where Elias bartered for medicine, revealing too much about their vulnerability. And as they pressed on toward rumors of a safe haven in the mountains, the infected grew bolder, packs roaming the snow-swept trails, forcing detours that drained their strength, until they arrived at this very settlement on Christmas Eve, the air thick with the scent of pine and distant gunfire, and Elias, spotting the infected lurking near the cabin, dispatched it quietly with his knife, its body crumpling into the snow, but not before Lily, who had wandered ahead in search of warmth, sat on the porch, her bare feet numb, doll in arms, waiting for a miracle. And now, as Elias knelt, lantern illuminating her tear-streaked face, her question hung between them like a fragile bridge over an abyss.
Can you pretend to be my dad?
Just until Mommy comes back. And Elias, his voice rough but kind, nodded, taking her hand, unaware that this moment would unravel secrets long buried, pulling them into a vortex of hope and heartbreak that neither could foresee, the family inside oblivious, their celebration a stark contrast to the duo's quiet desperation outside. As Elias lifted Lily into his arms, her small body shivering against his chest, the doll's button eyes staring blankly into the night, he glanced through the window at the family within, their faces alight with joy that felt like a distant memory. A life he once knew before the world crumbled under the weight of infection and isolation, and with ghosts snorting softly behind them, steam rising from its nostrils like ethereal signals, Elias carried her away from the porch, weaving through the snow-laden streets of the settlement, lanterns flickering in windows like wary eyes watching their passage, the distant moans of infected blending with the wind's lament, and they found refuge in an empty stable at the town's edge, where Elias barricaded the door with hay bales and lit a small fire in a rusted barrel, the flames casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. And as Lily warmed by the heat, her color returning, she repeated her plea, just until Mommy comes back, her voice laced with a child's unwavering faith. And Elias, stirring a pot of scavenged beans over the fire, felt a crack in his resolve, for in her eyes he saw echoes of his lost daughter, and he agreed with a gruff nod. All right, kid. I'll play along, but deep down, he knew her mother was likely gone, claimed by the raiders or the plague, a truth he couldn't yet voice. And that night, as snow piled against the walls, they shared stories under a tattered blanket, Lily describing her mother's warm hugs and homemade pies, while Elias spun tales of ranch life before the fall, of cattle drives under starry skies and festivals with fireworks that lit the heavens. And in those moments a tentative family formed, fragile as frost on glass, but as days turned to weeks in the settlement, which they learned was called Haven, a fortified outpost run by a council of survivors clinging to traditions like Christmas to ward off despair, Elias took on odd jobs, mending fences and guarding perimeters, his skills as a rancher proving invaluable in tending to the few remaining livestock. While Lily played with other children, her doll always close, but shadows loomed, for rumors spread of a raider band approaching, led by a ruthless figure known as the Scarred One, who collected children for labor in their camps. And Elias, overhearing this in the communal hall where families gathered for meager feasts, felt dread coil in his gut, especially when Lily confided that her mother's captors bore similar scars, ritual marks of their clan, and determined to protect her. Elias began training her in earnest, teaching evasion tactics in the snowy woods, how to hide in drifts and signal with whistles, all while pretending to be her father, calling her daughter in public to blend in, a role that grew less pretend with each passing day, as he bandaged her scraped knees and sang off-key lullabies to chase away nightmares. But tension escalated when scouts reported sightings of infected hordes migrating south, drawn by the settlement's lights. And in a midnight raid, The barriers shook under assault, clickers breaching the outer walls, their eerie echoes piercing the night. And Elias, revolver blazing, fought alongside the guards, his horse ghost charging through the fray, hooves trampling the fungal abominations, while Lily hid in the cabin, clutching her doll, whispering prayers for her pretend dad's return. And as dawn broke, bloodied but victorious, Elias staggered back, finding her safe. Their embrace a silent vow, but the victory was Pyrrhic, for the raid exposed weaknesses, and whispers of betrayal circulated, pointing to a traitor within who had dimmed the perimeter lights, and Elias, suspicious of a newcomer with scarred arms, began investigating discreetly, following trails in the snow that led to hidden caches of supplies, unraveling a plot where the Scarred One's spies infiltrated Haven, aiming to abduct the children during the upcoming New Year's celebration. And confiding in the council, Elias proposed a trap, using himself as bait, but Lily overheard, her eyes wide with fear, begging him not to go. "You're my dad now, even if pretend," and touched. Elias promised to return, but as the plan unfolded under a full moon, snow crunching under boots, he confronted the traitor in a derelict barn, the fight brutal, knives flashing in the dim light, and victorious but wounded. Elias learned the shocking truth. Lily's mother was alive, held captive by the Scarred One as leverage, her location a map etched on the traitor's arm, and racing back through the storm. Elias gathered a small posse, including hardened survivors who owed him favors, and they set out at dawn, horses thundering across frozen plains, the wind whipping like accusations, infected lurking in ravines but avoided. Through cunning paths, and after days of grueling travel, they reached the raiders' camp, a fortress of rusted vehicles and barbed wire, where under cover of night Elias infiltrated, his rancher's stealth serving him well, dispatching guards silently until he found the holding cells. And there, gaunt but fierce, was Lily's mother, Sarah, her eyes lighting with recognition as he whispered her daughter's name. But alarms blared, chaos erupting in gunfire and screams, the posse storming the gates and in the melee. Elias fought the Scarred One himself, a towering brute with a face like twisted leather, their duel ending with Elias's bullet finding its mark, but not before a blade grazed his side, blood soaking the snow, and freeing Sarah, they fled on horseback. The camp burning behind them, infected drawn to the flames like moths to doom. And as they rode back to Haven, Sarah revealed how she had been captured while scouting for food, enduring horrors but holding on to hope for her child. And upon reunion, Lily's cry of "Mommy" echoed through the settlement, tears flowing as they embraced. But Elias, stepping back, felt a hollow ache, his pretend role ending. Yet Lily turned, pulling him close. "You were my dad when I needed one." And Sarah, grateful, invited him to stay, forming a new family in the ruins. The three of them facing the apocalypse together, ghost grazing nearby, the snow beginning to melt with hints of spring, symbolizing renewal amid despair. And in Haven, celebrations rang out, Christmas lights twinkling once more, a beacon of resilience.